In September 2012, the provincial government proposed what's called a wage freeze bill, and it's called the Protecting Public Services Act. It's sort of an Orwellian name because it doesn't really protect public services, but it's built off of this Bill 115, which was the legislation passed in September that essentially gutted from teachers their sick days and forbid the right to strike. And so the idea of the Protecting Public Services Act is that we'll extend these labor restrictions to the broader public sector. Now, of course, when McGuinty resigned as premier just a few weeks ago, he prorogued the legislature, and so that bill dies. But that doesn't mean that it's gone, because of course the governing Liberals, along with the opposition Conservatives, are the ones who teamed up to propose this legislation in the first place. And when the legislature comes back with a new Liberal leader, we should all expect that we'll be revisiting the question of public sector austerity.
Understanding the broader context is essential. Certainly in Ontario and around the world, we're seeing governments and businesses promote an agenda called austerity. Austerity is something of a euphemism and essentially means cuts. So it is about cutbacks in the public sector. It's also about freezing wages and constraining the rights of labor unions. This has a number of negative effects. It disproportionately impacts women, many of whom are public sector workers, and it certainly hurts those who use public services, ranging from students in public and secondary schools, at colleges and universities, patients, and all sorts of community members.
Austerity is not inevitable. It's a choice, and politics is fundamentally about choices. In this case, the provincial government has decided that they want to gut the public sector and restrict the rights of public sector workers. So the question is, how do we fight back? And there's various different things that faculty associations in all public sectors can do to resist these kinds of reforms. Number one, and OCUFA has been training people with regard to this particular issue, is lobbying. We have elected representatives of all political stripes in Niagara and across the province. We need to get our message out to them about why austerity is not a good choice for public education, that it's not a good choice for workers in general. But lobbying can only bring us so far, because we know that two of the parties, the Liberals and Conservatives at Queen's Park, are firmly supporting an austerity agenda. And so we have to think of other creative ways to use our power as a union to influence the provincial government. Part of that means working in partnerships with other unions in the post-secondary education sector, like the Canadian Union of Public Employees, the United Steelworkers, the Canadian Auto Workers, and the Ontario Public Service Employees Union, the Ontario Secondary School Teachers Federation. All of these unions represent a broad cross-section of university workers. We know that as faculty members and professional librarians, that we cannot create a silo for ourselves where we only talk about our own issues. We cannot win a fight against the provincial government unless we show some solidarity with all workers in the university sector and indeed in the public sector. One of the other strategies that's being proposed by unions to fight the austerity agenda is essentially a legal strategy. And of course, we've seen that teachers' unions and the Canadian Union of Public Employees have already launched constitutional challenges to the McGuinty government's Bill 115. Now, the legal challenges in that sort of strategy has important limitations. We're unlikely to hear any result from the Supreme Court of Canada for at least 5, 6, 7 years. And so the question is, can we wait that long to do something about this? And the answer to that, I think, is no. Even though we recognize that the Supreme Court has declared that collective bargaining is a fundamental right protected by the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms, we cannot sit idly by and wait for the Supreme Court to hammer home that point to provincial governments who clearly have wax in their ears.
So we should take seriously what has happened to the teachers in Ontario. The austerity agenda is about cuts, and these are serious. It's also clearly about curtailing the rights of labor unions, and we need to take this seriously. it's an ideal time for folks to become active with BUFA and unite so we can fight back and create a better Ontario and a better Brock.